Revenge films.
When I just started junior high school, my father died in a car accident. It was so sudden I couldn't process it. Mom and I were so stunned we couldn't think straight. Then my aunt appeared. She's Dad's sister and lived in the next town over. She and Dad got along well. She was usually so friendly, and I remember her being so nice to me. But right after Dad passed away, my aunt robbed me and Mom of our inheritance. She brought several women along with her who seemed to be her friends and surrounded us so that we wouldn't escape. She was so foul-mouthed it was unbelievable, saying,
"It was too much to tolerate how you've always treated my brother."
And looked down on me, saying,
"Your grades are so bad it's hard to believe you're his son."
She also said,
"Aren't you ashamed that you're going to take my brother's legacy?"
Even thinking about it now, I don't think her words or actions were appropriate for someone who just lost his father. The abuse from my aunt, who'd been friendly before Dad's death, was mentally unbearable. Mom and I, who were severely impaired in our judgment, ended up agreeing to the transfer of the inheritance. Then, Mom and I were evicted from our home with only the bare necessities, and our house became my aunt's. Having lost both her husband and money, Mom started working at a bar to raise me. Dad's drinking buddy owned a bar, and he hired her to work there. But when my aunt saw Mom going out at night to work, she assumed she was working at a nightclub and called her a whore. I got so mad and yelled at her, "Whose fault do you think this is? Mom's not a hostess in the first place!" My aunt stopped interfering, partly because I yelled at her more than she thought I would. Mom, freed from a major source of stress, gradually began to look better and acted more cheerfully. And so, for more than 10 years, we were in peace. Time really is nice, and the anger I've had diminished to the point I was barely aware of it. But at the beginning of this year, I received a call from my aunt via my cousin. She said she really wanted to talk to me about something. Of course, I refused. I honestly didn't want my life to be disturbed any more than it already was. But my cousin persisted and finally told me about my aunt's current situation. Apparently, my aunt had terminal cancer and was told she didn't have long to live. She said she really wanted to talk to me and my mom before she died. My cousin wanted to fulfill her last wish. I asked him to wait a few days for me to think about it. I decided to see her on my own without telling Mom. When I showed up, my aunt had turned skin and bone and looked nothing like her former self. There was no trace of the woman who used to taunt me and Mom. When we started talking, she apologized. Looking back on her past, it seems she was haunted by a sense of guilt. I won't admit that her words,
"I was too hard on your mother and made her sell her body.
contained any regret or remorse.
I'll do anything to make amends for it. I'm sure my brother wouldn't be happy that you and I don't get along."
It goes without saying that she was the one who caused all of this. I almost exploded with anger and dismay when I heard her say this. But I felt sorry for my cousin too. He realized what his own mother had done to us while listening to the conversation I had with her. He turned pale, acted suspiciously, and then covered his face and slumped down, repeating, "What the hell?" I guess he didn't know until now. His own mother had surrounded her own relatives, cursed them, and robbed them of their inheritance. Of course, being her family, my cousin had used that money without knowing it. Even though Mom and I had signed relinquishment of property, it was meaningless as we were threatened while being unable to accept the reality of losing a family. My cousin was shocked at what his mother had done. My aunt said she'd do whatever it takes to make amends, so I said, "Have your son renounce his inheritance. I won't admit any advancement either." He was upset for a moment, but then agreed, saying, "Okay, I think it's a reasonable request." But my aunt was very upset and confused. She demanded a change in the conditions. My cousin, who was to receive the inheritance, said, "There's no way I could accept the inheritance." But my aunt refused. "What are you talking about when you're the one who took someone else's property? Even though I didn't know, I grew up with that money." How embarrassing can this be? He looked so hurt. Seeing this, my aunt reluctantly agreed. But when my aunt, cousin, and I exchanged signed promises, she said,
"I really, really regret what I did, and I don't want you to feel the same way. You know how much a legacy can help when a family member dies."
My aunt started complaining again. "How dare she say that? But before I could say anything, my cousin raised his voice and yelled at his mother. "Sign it! Now!" So my aunt reluctantly signed the document. But right before she finished signing it, she started complaining again. I just couldn't take it anymore. How does it feel to throw away everything you've built up over the years without leaving anything to your child? My aunt's face turned red. She spat, ranted something, and threw a pen at my head. You took my father's inheritance so gallantly, but you didn't want to leave your own inheritance to your child? Don't you think that's selfish? Dad didn't want to leave you his inheritance. As if to say that I was right, my cousin listened silently. Finally, he said, "You should know what you've done. Even if you don't sign it, I won't spend a dime. There's no way I could. I've been living off of other people's money. How can I act like I'm not such a person?" My aunt was stunned and signed the paper. When I called my cousin sometime later, he told me that she'd suddenly gone crazy. He said she really seems to be tormented by a genuine sense of guilt, but I don't know that, and it's her. Then the other day, my aunt died. I find myself thinking that I'd be happy if she suffered even a little at the time of her death. As my aunt had promised before her death, my cousin really didn't receive a single dime of his inheritance. He came to greet my mother and me. "Even though I didn't know, I am truly sorry. My mother is dead now, but I apologize on her behalf." He got down on his knees in his suit and didn't raise his head for some time. He's my cousin, so of course Mom knew him.
Look up. It's not your fault, so don't worry about it.
When he heard this, he said, "I'm sorry for ruining your lives." He then gave us the cash card and pin. "This is my mother's property. I've since told my mother and made her sign over all her property to you." Mom and I were astonished. No, you can't give us that. If we take that, we'll be doing the same thing as your mom." "No, not at all. I'm giving back what you were entitled to in the past. Take it. Otherwise, I'll never forgive my mother, and I'll hate her for the rest of my life." He pleaded. Mom and I were puzzled, but my cousin stubbornly refused to change his opinion. We knew it'd be hard to live the rest of his life without being able to forgive his mother, who was no longer with us. Then Mom said,
Okay, we'll take it.
My cousin looked up, looking relieved.
But I'll ask you to take half the money. If you don't accept that condition, I won't accept it.
My cousin looked troubled for a moment, but agreed in the end. What my aunt did was wrong, but thanks to my cousin, I was able to stop thinking any worse of her, too. I wanted to tell her that she really was a horrible person, but she was right in the way she raised her son.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.